Welcome everyone. I think it's 7 o'clock. We'll get on with our presentation workshop briefing. I'll firstly do a statement of acknowledgement. I'd like to acknowledge the land that we meet on today. It's traditional lands for the Gawler people in respect to their spiritual relationships with their country. We also acknowledge the Gawler people as the custodians of the Greater Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Gawler people today. All right, so moving from there, Chris Cowley is double booked, so he's at a Rotary presentation tonight, according to the acting mayor. So here's an apology. So without too much ado, I think we'll get into it. So the first session from 7 till 8 tonight is basically Springwood, Gawler East, as you probably saw from the circulation of information Friday afternoon. And then after that, we've got a bit of a session on FOGO, which we will talk about shortly. So there is quite a group from Welco. We are almost outnumbered by them, which is perfectly fine. So do you want to all come up as a group and introduce yourself? Is that the easiest way rather than me introducing you while you're sitting down? Do you want to, don't be shy. I'll give you the whole front podium and I'll come back when you're finished. Jack is the slide master. The clicker's not working.
I might introduce you all if you... Sure. Hi everyone, I'm Claire Tate, Chief Operating Officer of Welco. This is Simon McLennan, he's our National Head of Developments. Russell Gwynn, who's our Head of Developments in South Australia and of this project. And Lucy Sawyer, who's our Development Manager on the Springwood project as well. Great.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, do you want to just... Lucy, come over. There is only two of us presenting tonight, so we won't keep you for too long, but obviously we're here to talk about Welco and the Springwood project, and thank you for having us tonight. We're obviously incredibly proud of the project here at Springwood and being part of the Gawler community. Just last week we were here filming with the football club president, and it was a really great way for us to see the town again, and we were doing some filming of ads, and it just really is a vibrant place for everyone to live and work. So really excited to be here tonight and to talk to you about our Springwood project. For any of you that don't know much about Welco, we are a national business. We have projects in Queensland, Victoria and South Australia. A pipeline or a total value under management of $2.2 billion, and we've had some real successes across those projects. In South Australia, next slide, sorry. We were founded by Andrew Welsh, who many of you may know. We've got about 50 years of combined experience across our portfolio with obviously Simon and Russell in South Australia as well. We are really building out our capability in South Australia to support the portfolio here, which is not just Springwood, but other projects here as well. We have Gracewood in Malala. I don't know if anyone saw the Bunyip newspaper article last week, but we did the sod turning there. That's 510 residential lots in Malala. Ayr in Strathalbyn, a little bit smaller. 107 lots in Strath there. And obviously Springwood, which we're here to talk about today. Next up for us will be Jane Eliza in Renmark. This one we recently signed a land facility agreement with the Renmark-Paringa Council, and that one will be 800 residential lots built around a marina, which will activate the community there for tourism and marina lifestyle. And then our active projects in Victoria and Queensland, these are key projects, not all of them. We have Yalara and Echuca, I believe. It's not dissimilar to the project here with the way that it's set up and the parks and community there. We also have Harlow in Bendigo, 450 residential lots, and coming up we have a big project in Queensland, 1,300 residential lots. In Fernvale, I just mentioned that we are really proud to be part of the community here and supporting the local football club as a major sponsor for the last 3 years, and before that another 7 years when the project was owned by the previous owner. sorry, I can't remember who it was. We are really proud of that, and then we also really like the community spirit when we have our community events across the project. So next slide is our Easter and Christmas events, as well as other events that we hold throughout the year to really activate the community. Really great way to see families out in our project and really starting to see the project come to life. And with that, I'll hand over to Lucy.
Thank you, Claire. So as Claire mentioned, obviously Springwood's been going on for quite some time now, but we've found just over 24 and 25, we've had some really great momentum and a lot of exciting progress been made. Firstly, the completion of our stage 3. So we've got about 45 homes in there now, either completed or under construction at the moment, and plenty of residents already moved in. We've got stage 4 has recently been completed, title registration in April of this year, and we had our first settlements for those purchases today, so that's really exciting. We had the Schomburg Drive and Mullamar Way signalised intersection, which is now underway or now completed, and it really just relieves that sort of ease of traffic flow, creating a safe environment for just traffic through the commercial and the residential area of Springwood. We've had the closeout of defects on Highfield Stage 2, the approval of the revised stormwater management strategy, which basically carries on from Stage 5 for the rest of the project, the finalisation of our transitional period where we've seen WGA move away from the engineering consultants in favour of Spire, and we've also moved from Buttrose as the principal contractor to Winslow. We've also now commenced the Stage 5, 6, 7 and Quarry bulk earthworks package, which is a huge earthworks package. It's about 400,000 cubic metres of earthworks being moved across the quarry site and 5, 6 and 7. That will allow, obviously, the 5, 6, 7 construction programs to be really shortened, and then also it prepares ourselves for the exciting development in the reserve, in the quarry, which we'll be talking about later. In terms of the engineering approvals, we've been working really hard and really closely with the engineering team at Council just to get Stage 5 and 6 approved. Now in February that happened, and Stage 7's currently underway for approval. We anticipate that, I'm hoping sort of end of April, if I can be cheeky. Stage 9 has been resubmitted, working again with Council, and we expect that to be approved in sequence after Stage 7. As obviously we're all aware, the quarry, or Springwood, houses an old quarry site, and there's been a lot of work happening in the background to remediate that into a residential and community use. We've heard now from the Department of Education that we're going to move away from having the school site as it's not the optimal spot for it, and there's really no need for it. So instead we've been redesigning just to allow more of a residential use and create a layout that really has a good product mix for our purchasers, allows constructability of homes, and then also just achieves an outcome that actually embraces the slope and some of the geographical unique features, which I think will be the best outcome for purchasers and residents. So here's our project master plan, which we're all familiar with. This master plan shows the school site having been removed, and then it's just one of the sort of options for the redesign in that quarry lot, in the quarry precinct, I should say. You'll see from the master plan, it's been designed heavily influenced by the waterway, the geographical features of the site, retaining trees, and then there's also several sort of easements in favour of sea gas, the power network, SA Water, which has also been designed into this. In terms of stages that we've completed now, I mentioned stage 3 and 4, and they're just south of the pink commercial lots at the top there. And then if we look to the future, we're going to be in stage 5, 6 and 7, which is just west of those lots. So the next steps and the look ahead for the rest of the year, we'll be commencing stage 5, 6, 7 and 9A construction. Commencement of the outstanding streetscapes that we have just to complete some of those areas in the village and Highfields. We'll have the redesign and the approval of the quarry precinct. Commencement of a couple of big ticket items for SA Water, being the Gawler East Link Road trunk sewer and the stage 7 sewer pump station. And just the general continued expansion of our commercial offering with a few new exciting tenancies and some permanent approvals as well. So that's really Springwood update in a nutshell. Thank you so much. Got some, yeah.
Yeah, now it's open to questions. They've stormed through the PowerPoint, so they're now yours for the next half hour, 20 minutes.
Can we just go back to the master plan, please? So how are you going to treat the power easement, the iron grassland, and on the river corridors? What's your plans for those three areas?
Sorry, Councillor Coffin, actually.
Oh, sorry, I'll say it again. Just wondering, how will you treat the high voltage easement, the iron grasslands, and also the river? How will you treat those?
Look, great question. The design, in terms of the power easement, we are designing around that. That's obviously being retained in stage 8. That's really where we are up to design-wise. But Spire are working with SA Power on that one. Yeah.
I suppose I'm asking what treatments will you do there? Will you be restoring a grassland back there, and the iron grass that's of national significance? Okay. Right. Okay. Yep. And then the iron grass is of national significance, as you know, and also the river corridor.
I've got
Thanks, Heath.
Mike and Heath.
I'll just step in from a landscape architecture perspective. So we've been working with Spire and with Wellcar around the regeneration of the creek line. We're aware of what the native veg requirements are for the creek line, and we've developed a plant mix that with council and council's landscape architect for rehabilitation of the creek edge itself. Through those power line easements, so stage 5 and stage 9, again, we've been working with council in terms of a species mix that works. We're also cognizant of the fact that there are specific requirements around heights of trees under power lines, and we're just in the process now of working through those requirements and if possible, getting some dispensation for some larger trees under the power lines.
And I suppose that's exactly why I asked the question about whether you'd be reinstating a grassland because of the heights, and also the iron grassland. What's your plans for that? Because it's of national significance.
Correct. So we've got a biodiversity person on the team, Travis Howe, who's been working alongside us in terms of ratifying our designs and making sure that we're not doing anything to damage that. And wherever possible, we're reinstating those grasslands with native endemic species.
Final question is, how will you manage the woody weeds? Will you be managing controlling those woody weeds before it's handed over to council, or will that be a requirement that council will have to pick up later on?
No, so as part of the demolition process, we'll be removing and remediating the sites that we touch, and through that process we'll be removing those weeds, particularly in the Highfield area, and I'll assume down through stage 5 and stage 9 as well.
So my question was just around, there's mention of commercial. Is that, is the idea that there'll be more commercial brought online, or that the existing commercial space will continue to be developed? Or it's been a general, topic for this council that we're very residential heavy and would like to see more commercial space. So I was just wondering what the plans were there.
Take that one. We're working with a number of tenants at the moment to fill the existing commercial space through the site. That's thing one. Thing two is then working with council over the future connection road coming up from Concordia, and there may be future opportunities that we can look at to expand the commercial offering down here. Yep.
My question is that I don't think the community is aware that the primary school has been taken off the plan. So my question is, are you going to publicise that and let the community know?
Maybe we'll park that until we present our session at half past. With respect, Councillor, in regards to the quarry site, which is roughly where that school adjoins, I would envisage that would be something we would talk about as part of the community infrastructure debate and informing the community as to the updates as to what's being delivered on ground. So I would have thought you'd deal with that change parallel with what's happening in the quarry. That's my suggestion anyway. But if you think we should do it differently, I'm happy to get your feedback.
There's just a lot of online chat where I can still see expectations from new residents that there will be a primary school there. My feeling is somebody needs to communicate that to the community, whether that's council or the developers. I don't have a strong opinion on that, but I think sooner the better to perhaps ease some of the discussion.
Looking at the master plan again, and I look at reference 39 and 38, I notice now that there's 2 rows of houses abutting the quarry. Well, there's actually 4 rows there. 1, 2, 3, 4 rows now. What block sizes are they? And do you think they're going to contribute to heat sinks, considering that you find it difficult to plant any trees, and that's a state government requirement, well, not I don't know if it's a requirement under an act or anything, but to have a 30% canopy cover by 2050 or 2045? How do you envisage, you would ameliorate the heat sink that might occur there?
I can take that one. I think as part of our updated design, we're obviously going to work with council to make sure we've got the right product mix sitting in there. We've obviously got to meet the market in terms of the product that the market is looking for. So in terms of lot sizes, that's still a little bit up in the air, but I guess if you'd argue it's probably going to be fairly consistent with what the balance of the area has already developed as. So around probably the 400, 450 square metre lot mark is probably what we'd see the product mix looking like. I guess to the heat island aspect, I guess there's design guidelines that we work with council over to make sure we have the right products or the right materials for built form, but also in terms of a landscape environment, we'll work with council in terms of the replanting of the verges. Yep.
Firstly, thanks for coming out. Sometimes it can feel like you're on a bit of trial. Obviously, we got a lot of questions out there, so it is handy to be armed, so thank you. Are you able just to expand a little bit on the Department of Education's new direction and how we did arrive? I think that might actually help. It was touched on before. Secondary to that, are you just able to explain the process, this might be with Andrew as well, in how the infrastructure that is actually delivered back to council is actually protected as you deliver on your stages? Or naturally, we have a whole bunch of roads that are coming online from us, but a lot of the damage or usage, I should say usage, that will occur is a lot of the heavy plant and equipment utilising these roads. We'd love to be able to understand the quality management systems you employ just to make sure that we have that make good confidence that when we do ultimately have full control of the assets that link into these major infrastructure deliveries, they're not used and abused.
Sure. Did you want to maybe what you guys do from a construction point of view? Oh, Mike, maybe you can have in terms of the control of the contracts.
Sorry, I can answer the question in terms of the damage to infrastructure, or lack thereof. So ordinarily what we'd do is a dilapidation report prior to commencement of construction. And so what that ensures is by the time the works are complete and handed back to council, we've got, the status quo, if you like, as it was before the contractor moved into the site. So our CA people, contract administration people, take care of that. And council staff are involved in that process as well in terms of the ongoing supervision through the project and also at the commencement and the completion of the project too. So you've got a double insurance there on that front.
Sorry, thank you. It's a process I'm very familiar with, but it is handy just to really touch on it for people that aren't in the industry, because it is really easy to see a lot of the trucks and the plant and equipment, but people actually not understand that process. So thank you for elaborating on that. And with the Department of Education ruling on the public school, is there any conversations going on with private opportunities, or are they fully exhausted and we are where we are in relation to the quarry site?
In terms of the school site, maybe.
I think the Department of Education is in the section.
Yeah, I think we've sort of guided by what the Education Department are letting us know.
We've had conversations both with the private sector and with the Department of Education. I think the Department of Education's focus has been more towards Anglevale. which you're probably all broadly aware of with the amount of growth that's occurring down there. And I think over time, you'll probably see a focus also on Gawler when that area gets its structure planning. There hasn't been any focus from them or inclination, even though we've perhaps encouraged them to think about Springwood. There is no appetite for Springwood. In the private sector, we have spoken to various parties. Some of them have actually come in and spoken to us in detail. And it's fair to say they're looking probably in the south as well. They think that's probably more that suits their needs. And some of them already have, if you like, a footprint within the Northern Corridor. So they're known entities, but again, they haven't been forthcoming on the quarry site. They think there are other more optimal sites of a larger scale with better frontage arrangements that suit their needs. So they have a range of interested parties, as far as I know.
I'm looking now down at 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33. That's quite a steep site, as we know, and you are abutting up against Pera Woodlands. There only seems to be one exit there in case if there's a fire. How do you reconcile that with your design? Because looks like there's only one exit back into what could be, a fire-prone area, considering you're so close to Pera Woodlands.
Let me take that one. We will be looking at that again. I think this master plan probably carries a little bit of legacy from previous designs. Part of what we're obviously going to do is sharpen that up, make sure it does meet current standards. 2 points of access is vitally important for these sort of areas. So yes, that is something we're well aware of. Yep.
Okay,
yep.
Thank you.
With Calton Road, we on the east, the furthest eastern end, with all that problem where both cars park either side, and with the traffic flow that's coming down Calton Road now, it's a real mess. Is the same thing going to happen from the service station, say, from there to East Cheek Avenue? Is that going to be abutted to the Calton Road the same way as the first lot was? Or is it going to be a separate road inside where the row of trees are, or whatever? Is there a different plan there?
Yeah, so let me take that one. There won't be a separate road. I think we will continue to work with council over the upgrade and the treatments of Calton Road. At this stage, we're not planning to make any significant changes to that. I guess the ... is as part of the development of Concordia and the expansion of the road network through the area, those types of items get addressed. So I think, from what I understand, there's some potential off-street parking or parking embayments which are proposed along Calton Road, which may help alleviate some of that traffic congestion. But we'll continue to work with council over that aspect. Yep.
My son's happy, he's a local crash repairer with that, but we live in front of the other place and down a bit further we don't want to get up at night and clear them off the road.
I just had one more, interested to see how you're finding the industry supply and demand. Are you able to keep up with the demand at this point in time? Are you getting stages online as quickly as you're getting those expression of interest of sales? Or are you, not being able to keep up with demand, and would you like to be going quicker? Just a little bit of insight around that, of what you're experiencing.
Well, I mean, as you'll all appreciate, the market's running well down here. I guess for us, it's about trying to meet that market as well. So there's a balance between how many contracts or stages we go out and sell versus being able to deliver. So I guess as a developer, you've got to balance off the need to sell in advance, but also be able to deliver and meet the expectations of the purchasers. So yeah, it's a delicate balancing act. I guess in terms of where we stand at the moment, approvals are the other thing that really probably drives our agenda to a large extent. And so I guess we will continue to work with you guys or the administration over getting those approvals in place, and then obviously update the master plan, making sure we get our planning in place. That allows us to then go into the next stages with confidence. We don't want to be carrying sales, I guess you'd call them, or contracts with purchasers for more than probably 12, 18 months is sort of where we'd want to top out. We feel that anything beyond that starts getting a bit too difficult to manage. At the moment, we have been selling on stage 9, which is the Calton Road. demand is certainly there. Yeah. If we could, we'd love to be able to sell as much as we can, but ultimately we need to be able to deliver that too. So, there's a balance there. Yep.
The traffic lights that are there, next to the shopping centre, and who operates them? Is that operated through the system in Adelaide? And is there going to be any other traffic lights put on the Link Road?
Imagine yes. I think the answer is yes. Oh, perfect. Thank you.
So the traffic lights are operated through, in terms of control, in terms of what's green, what's red and stuff, it's all done through a third party, through council's contract with Sage Engineering. They do the bulk of all the traffic signalisation management throughout metropolitan Adelaide, so they're very good at what they do. At this stage, there is no further traffic signals envisaged for the Link Road.
Any final questions? We're close to on time still. We've got one or two questions if you want to. If you like knock it too easily.
Yeah. Happy to answer them.
Are you guys sticking around for the quarry conversation as well? Because there might be some, more that flow through in relation to that.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right. We'll move into part B of the first session. So hopefully you got this online in the last few days. Move forward, Jack, next one. So we'll talk about growth in Gawler East generally, how the separate rate worked, but I think I'll skip over that largely because I have briefed council before about how separate rates work, and if anyone's got any questions about separate rates, maybe that's an offline conversation because it's pretty hard to explain in time we've got available. And then there's risk scoping interventions, which I think is the meat and gravy out of this exercise, and then the way forward. Just to revisit it, so back in 2011 we talked about 3,900 lots, and that got reduced to, depending on who you read, 3,300 or 3,400 lots by about 2017 for a range of reasons, but largely the reality that there are some challenges topographically in the area. We did a revisit of the yields in July 23 using surveyors, and came up with a number of about 2,850. So as you can see, I guess the trend is that there are less lots, but there's a range of reasons. If we look at Bentley on rigs on the ground, for example, we know they're selling lots that are probably closer to 600 to 800 square metres. Our guess would be that when they eventually dispose of their land on the corridor, will probably sell lots because of the slope of the land, which will be relatively large. And there's been a mix of lot sizes within the Wellco development. And of course, because the deed was set up in 2017 after the land was rezoned, there was something like 400 lots that had already been developed, which are excluded from the separate rate, but that's why council has skin in the game in terms of contributions on community infrastructure and other things, because their general rates are offset against us paying contributions towards deliverables. So we're about a third of the way through. Next. Yep.
Could I just ask quickly, just going back to that master plan, those little blocks just above the quarry look very, very small. What are they? 400 to 450, and it's a very narrow little road.
Yeah.
Is that the 1,700? Is that a good indication of the yield for that development, considering how small those little blocks are? Because I know there's no minimum block size up there, so they could have a block that's 10 square metres and sell it.
Yeah.
But is that 1,700? And the reason why I'm asked is, when does the intervention come in? When the 5,000 people...
We'll get to interventions.
Yeah, because if I go 2,850 times 2.3, which is the average, that's 6,555 residents.
Sure.
So, I just need to know when that kicks in.
There can be a lot of maths involved with this. Yeah. And as you probably saw from Wellco's presentation, I think they talked about 2,000 lots and I've said 1,700, but, it depends on how you deliver the various stages, and I think Wellco have said themselves that they're revisiting their master plan, and we all have different assumptions as to what's going to be delivered, but the market will dictate that largely.
But the trigger's the 5,000.
I'm suggesting we have different triggers to what we had before. I mean, we'll get to that.
Right.
Next slide.
Andrew, can I just check, just small details. So you're talking about Department DIT, and you're talking about the Commissioner of Highways.
Yeah.
Same?
More or less, yeah, the Crown. Yeah, they are the same entity effectively. It's the Minister for Transport.
It's the minister.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I thought you were, but it's a little confusing.
The Commissioner of Highways is what's referred to in the deeds and a separate rate.
Right, but it's DIT who will sell the
But
land.
it's DIT.
Thank you.
And of course, the acronym changes from one state government term to the next. This slide basically just talks about liabilities, as you know, but what it doesn't tell you is the liabilities that council has, and it doesn't tell you about the liabilities through Commissioner of Highways DIT, which are numbers that are reasonably significant in their own right. But those numbers will need to be recast, as I've suggested. But at the moment, the 2017 figures get re-indexed each year as council sets its rates for Gawler East. But the number we're talking, 26 million plus is the overall number there, not including council. Next slide. Then there's the issue of what we've collected, which is a fairly small component relative to what it's going to be. And then that goes down the question of when does it get paid, and there's lots get cleared. We're in the early stages, as you probably gather, but there's like 35, 40 stages of the Wellco development alone, and of course there's be multiple stages on the DIT land or Commissioner of Highways land. So the contributions to date aren't reflective of what the contributions will ultimately be because they're set by the separate rate. Next slide.
Andrew, again, I'm going to warn you that past slide's got an arithmetic error on it. Just to prove to you I do read it.
An error?
Yes.
I knew I couldn't get this past you. What was the error?
Well, if you go back to it.
Go back.
The total in the bottom right-hand box is not correct.
3.2, no, you're right. 3.298 versus, it is, isn't it? 3.238 plus 60.
My apologies. You are.
Am I right?
You are right. I am wrong.
It's always
Sorry.
the first time. you had me successfully paranoid that I had it wrong again. But okay, I got away with it this time. So Richard in Wendy's team has been looking at traffic interventions, and as you know, there's going to be 3 workshops. This is the first workshop. The next workshop, which will be May, will be on the Cheek Avenue corridor because we're talking about Concordia, and then the third one will be about all other traffic interventions. So Circa have been commissioned to do a review of traffic modelling and numbers, and yes, we'll talk about ACOM as well, who've done the Cheek Avenue modelling, which we'll talk about in May. But it's fair to say that we've been working through what those liabilities are, and there are questions about whether some of those interventions that we had in our thinking back in 2017 need to be there. If council's the only funder of that intervention, does it need to be there, or is it just straight capital works? But we'll talk about that as time allows. Next slide. So I'll talk about community. So there's a range of things we talked about in the quarry area, which is where the community facilities are supposed to be delivered for the whole of Gawler East. And yes, it happens to be on Springwood land because it's the most convenient location relative to the catchment. And the number being reflected on at the time was something in the order of about 7.6 mil. That was 2017 figures, and with indexation and so forth, it's a figure that's more or less 10 mil. One of the things you'll notice too is that a lot of the interventions relate to 10,000 population and 3,500 lots, and we're not going to get to 10,000 people in Gawler East, and nor are we going to get to 3,500 lots by anyone's current mathematics. So we need to review those, because basically what that means is if you take the development contributions, we'll get to a figure of 2,800, 2,900 lots, whatever the number's going to be. Our population might be 7,000 and change, but technically none of those triggers are met, the bottom 3, and then people will start pointing the finger and it's going, where's our facilities? So that's why any deed that we create has to be a living document that gets reviewed. So let's leave that one there at the moment. 2017 master plan, and there's been at least 3 or 5 different versions of the master plan over time, but the current version, as Councillor Hennessy points out, and I think others did as well, did show an oval. Yes, it's indicative of various things. If you took it literally, you'd be in a dark place because it talks about skate parks, none of which are referred to in the deeds, and we probably don't need. A whole lot of other interventions, including an AFL oval, which is probably $5 million by itself. It's indicative, so you wouldn't want to drill in too deep in terms of drainage detail and other things, and that's perfectly fine. It is what it is. It's supposed to give you an idea of some key themes. I guess that's what I've been working with Heath on a little bit over time, saying, well, we probably can't afford this level of investment. What can we afford? We'll go to the next slide. Yeah.
I know you're talking around that now, but if people saw that when they first bought into the area, isn't there a level of community expectation that, you know, some of this would actually be provided? Because people that in the first stage would have said, oh, okay, well, there's going to be this, that and the other, I'm going to move in. So how do we manage that community expectation when now we say this concept, it's only a concept plan, I suppose, you know, that it's not going to be there and potentially a lot of the other stuff isn't going to be there?
Yeah, it's a fair comment. And I think that's a comment you get from greenfield estates across the country. I remember back in Victoria, Point Cook, people have been developing there for decades, and people go, well, you sold me a vision, but it's not that. What have I got? And every place changes and evolves over time. There are things we can deliver. So back in 2017, we talked about 2 multi-purpose courts. Yes, we'll provide that. Yes, there'll be some irrigated land in the middle. It won't be an AFL oval, but we'll provide some green spaces, but we're seeing it more as a casual kick and play, for example. So I guess the theme is there, but the actual execution will be different. I have a suspicion back in 2017, we didn't cost the oval because we thought maybe the school would build it. I think. I couldn't find the detail, but that seems the valid assumption to make. But would a school want to spend $5 million on an oval? I doubt it. So I think you have to be honest with the community and say, we have to work based on what's deliverable. The population is less, therefore the need is less. We also live in a fiscal reality that we can only afford what we can afford, and that's the same for Wellco as it is for council and everyone else. What can we afford and what can we do? And I think that's also in the broader conversation of GARP and what might happen with the, say, the Gawler South Club site moving further south and a range of other investments in community facilities. Where this site sits now relative to that, perhaps there are differences in scale and perception now. Back in 2017, we thought we'd have a community hub, because I think we thought we might have a library up there or something, or a manned office, which we're not going to do anymore. So there are things that change, but I don't want to spend $6 to $8 million of ratepayers' money on a community hub when, you know, we can probably provide those facilities elsewhere in a more integrated fashion.
And I'd also just add to that as well, the one AFL-sized model as well in the modern day club, it always seems to be the one, and then we're working on our sporting clubs having the second smaller oval to rotate through in the same club area. So we'd almost build this infrastructure that would be outgrown as soon as someone would come in to use it if it was actually housing a club. And there was some anecdotal conversations about South Gawler actually moving up there and doing a bit of deal at that point in time, which that all sort of fell over as well, because I don't think it was going to suit their needs.
I'm happy to get Heath in the conversation as well. I might keep it closer, so I can handball at times. But
one of my questions, I guess, is just around timing and the management of the timing, because obviously it's you know, providing this open space for young families is a real life-changing thing for people that are living in these areas, and it's also a long-term financial plan changing thing for a council when you don't have the full yield of residential rate coming in, because you don't actually fully realise that until you're fully developed. But the depreciation comes online as soon as we take over the ownership. True. And then the renewal expenditure 12 month after 12 month after 12 month comes online as well. And by the time we start getting to the end of the staging, we end up having to almost rebuild components more or less, or you know, irrigation is end of life or whatever. So how are we actually trying to manage that balance so that we optimise when it comes online, but also don't let the young families miss out on their opportunity to play some sort of kicking a ball with their
There's perhaps a broad statement I'll make, and then we might even tag team a little bit on design philosophy in terms of the landscape solutions we've looked at, which we'll get onto with some slides shortly. But for example, I would wonder whether or not, rather than simply link it back to a population number or even a lot yield number, we might simply do it on a date number. We might say we have to have certain things by, say, 2030 or 2029, which is what I've said here, using the Jensen example, where we say, look, you've been here 15 plus years, some of you residents, you've been here since 2012. It's 2030, you know, your kids probably, you raise them at home, they're probably left home by now. But, at some point in time, in a measurable time frame, we need to be able to say, look, these multi-purpose courts will be available. Yes, you can, take your grandkids down and play at the swings or something. So I think we need to think about whether the triggers aren't just people or yield, but they're actually date-based. And at least we can lock that into our long-term financial plan. And then there's a design philosophy, which I'm happy for you to broadly talk about before we get into that in terms of maintenance and liability. If you want to talk just broadly about how you manage that?
Maintenance and liability, yeah, sure. Like I said, I think Springwood's been going for a number of years now. We've been lucky enough to develop a few of the reserves and the streetscapes for it. So we've learned a lot of lessons in terms of what's worked and what hasn't worked in terms of plant species and materials. We're always talking to council as well around the longevity of materials we specify, particularly for paths and furniture and that kind of stuff. So we're very cognizant of the fact that what goes into the parks, into the streets needs to be there for a long time, and if it does get damaged, it needs to be fixed quite quickly. So we use a lot of proprietary items as well. In terms of plant species, it's the same thing. So what is long-lived and what works, what's easy to maintain as well, and also in terms of grading, what's easy for council to maintain on a mower versus in sort of steeper batters that might need to be planted with a slightly different plant mix to enable maintenance on sort of by hand and by foot. So just over time, we've been able to adopt, I guess, a few philosophies, and also, I guess, working with council on their guidelines as well. So the council have got some really good guidelines around materiality and longevity and maintenance.
And it's fair to say that Heath's been working closely with Hayley and the team in the Hort area, so it's been a bit of a process there. And that's also been the case with Richard and Frimpong and the team looking at traffic and access and a whole lot of other things. What you'll probably see with the Chenstone work is, and even that is different from what I'm going to show you today, because that version showed a community hub of 250 square metres. We were thinking we don't need a 1,000 square metre hub. The only reason it was 1,000 square metres was because that's the size of the one we did at Evanston Gardens. But I seriously don't think the community wants to pay $6 million in today's value for a community hub when there's a whole lot of different things we also need. So we'll move forward from there. So this is probably where I will get Heath to talk a bit more about it, but I'm happy for you to talk about the design philosophy. We've gone through 7 versions of this, by the way, and I'm not saying this is by any means the final version, but I think it's a lot more advanced than before. And I guess we've gone from figures of $14 to $15 million for a full AFL oval and a whole lot of shelters and facilities with a 75-space car park down to like a 40-space car park, a managed playground solution, a lot more native landscaping, and an AFL oval that's more a kick and casual play space now. But I'm happy for Heath to talk about some of the design principles behind that.
So Andrew's correct. I think this is version at least 4, maybe 5, 6,
Close to 7.
7. There you go for the oval site. We're still calling it oval, but it's in fact we're calling it a village green now. So we moved away from that oval concept. So you can see that the heart of it's still the same. It's a big open grass kickabout turf space. There's no reason why you can't put up a couple of soccer goals if you want at one end. Cricket, whatever. It's very flexible. It's very flat as well. We've worked with Spire in terms of getting the levels of this. It's obviously got positive drainage, but we're getting it as flat as possible to enable those sorts of sports to occur on a passive way. I guess that's the heart of it. Then to the south of that, you can see the car park, which, as Andrew said, we've got that at around 44, I think, car parking spaces at the moment. There is a possibility to expand that if we feel that we need to in the future. Down to the bottom on the left-hand side is a wetland and detention basin system. So that's there for stormwater purposes, and that's integrated in a landscape way with the same species that's used throughout the park. We've got a primary path network, the lighter coloured path that you can see that circulates around the space. We've used the sort of geological formations of the old sandstone quarry face as sort of design inspiration for this. So rather than having sort of sweeping curves and that kind of stuff that you see landscape architects do sometimes, we've deliberately gone with more of a jagged sort of design philosophy here. So the paths are kind of more angular, as are the garden beds as well. To the top, obviously, we're interfacing with the sort of top of the quarry site there. We're trying to step down as fast as we can. So in some locations, we do have some retaining, got sort of rows of gabion walls in some locations just to try and take up some of those levels and terrace, particularly around where the tennis courts and the sports courts are. That's on its own little plateau. And then down below the courts, there's also a playground, like a nature playground that's sort of integrated with the topography through there. You can see some scattered shelters as well, so the larger rectangular shapes. There's also a toilet block adjacent the car park between the village green and the car park. Is like a toilet block there.
Worth mentioning too, the reason why despite, various debates as to why we would retain it given the distance to the shopping centre.
Correct. So there was debate as to whether it was justified to leave it in there or to remove it, and I guess debate turned to the proximity of this park to the shopping centre is probably a little bit far for people with prams, kids with toddlers, etc. So parents with toddlers, I should say. So the integration of a genuine toilet facility at the park was justified for those reasons. There's also some other sort of grassed areas that could potentially be turned into something else, like areas for markets, etc., adjacent to the car park as well, and scattered seating as well throughout the park as well. So just utilising those kind of junction points and pathways for seats.
The other thing that Heath's done, well, Heath himself and Track did costings for the project, but we also had RLB do costings for us, and we tried to get both those numbers down to a number we felt was more realistic. It wouldn't be a number with, like 13 or 14 million. It had to be a number that was 10 million or less. We'll get onto that shortly, but maybe Jack, if we go to the next slide, there might be more design philosophy.
Just some questions on that. Yeah. How's it going to stay green? Is Travis sort of giving you some really good summer active grasses and things like that, or?
Well, we are looking at irrigating the heart of this, so there will be some irrigation required. The balance, I guess the batters around the edges of the roads, we'd be looking at potentially not irrigating that. It does come back to species selection and the maintenance of the landscape elements. But I think that the heart of it would definitely be irrigated at a minimum, possibly some of the other landscape treatments around the playground as well.
Yeah, it'd be the ongoing maintenance. Is the mining rehabilitation fund you've looked at that at all for this site?
We haven't at this point in time. I've simply kept it back based on the master plan as it was, the costing model, and then what we can do in today's present day value. But if there's other options for funding, we'll certainly look at it.
The first one, you said sandstone. I thought it was a sand quarry.
Sand quarry, correct.
Yes, it's not sandstone.
No.
So I'm just concerned about the stability of those vertical walls. That's the first thing. And the other one is the little retention basin down the bottom. So everything's going to drain down there. It's not going to flow anywhere. That's just going to be a stagnant. I don't want to use the word. It's just going to be a still piece of water.
Yep.
How will that be managed? Like for salinity, for example. As you fertilise the green spaces, it washes down, it fills up in there. It silts up everything else. So how is that going to be managed? Because we have got other wetlands which I think we're struggling with, but I just want your view on that.
Absolutely. So we've factored in a maintenance access track too that you can see on screen. Yeah. So there will be whenever it's required to be silted out, there'll be access via a truck via that car park to get in there. And it's no different from the other reserve further up in Springwood. I think that gets maintained as well. That's got a bit of typhoon at the moment, but that gets maintained in a similar way. So whenever it's required, there'll be an access through that point.
And the vertical?
Oh, the vertical. So
the walls of the sand quarry. I mean, that looks quite unstructurally unsound to me. I'm not an engineer, but
no, it is structurally unsound. So that'll be removed and filled. So we're proposing to fill the quarry. To batter it.
Next slide. Okay. Right. Oh, this shows the fill.
There you go. So there's a bit of cut and fill there. You can see.
By the way, we never had section drawings before with any of the previous master planning, so it was a bit of a guess. Right. Yeah. Now it's not.
So what we've done is work with Spire in terms of the allotments above the quarry reserve and trying to sort of, I guess, cut into some of those, and then obviously reduce the need for that interface at the quarry edge to be as large. And then we've been able to use, I guess, a bit of a balanced cut and fill process to enable that quarry site to be filled with that cut, and also from other areas on site.
What material? It's a really high down to the base.
Well, that's what the modelling shows.
I'd like to see that.
I know we're only in master plan stage at the moment. I'm going to probably get a little bit technical, but given the topography of the site, is there opportunity for water harvesting and then using the water harvest to re-irrigate? Yeah. Okay.
And stormwater there is not just for the quarry, it's for the surrounding estate as well. So it'll be part of a stormwater network that Wendy's team will be managing.
So I do just want to put a little bit of caution and manage expectations on that. we're talking about retaining water in what is a very sandy area. Based on all the stormwater work that we have been doing, and Mike, feel free to chip in if you'd like, the possibility for a successful stormwater harvesting scheme in this area is realistically very limited. This is much more around having detention for the stormwater generated across the different estate areas around this area. It becomes an amenity water feature. And again, it's going to be part of the messaging around it. It is likely to have an ephemeral nature as well. It's probably not going to always have water in it. Water harvesting more broadly for Springwood is just quite difficult. So I think just please manage expectations on that. The reality is that the irrigation network for what we're proposing to irrigate here will have to have a third-party supply of water.
I certainly think any harvesting you did here would be basically for localised planting within the reserve as opposed to any broader application. So it'd be limited. I agree with that. Next slide, Jack. Design, Austin.
Sure. So one of the project precedents we looked at was one in Melbourne. So Nadiri Quarry in Melbourne was a reclaimed quarry site. They were able to work with the rock face in this particular example, though. It's obviously not a sand quarry. It was a bluestone quarry, I think. So you can see the sort of that long brown line on the left-hand side of the plan there. That's actually quarry face. So a slightly different context now, but at the time we were thinking, I wonder if we can use the quarry for that. But I guess what we wanted to show is that quarry repurposing is has been done before for residential development. So this is an example from Melbourne. The images on the right-hand side are just a selection of the materials palette. We spoke about the longevity of materials before. So using rock boulders as sort of almost play elements as well. So having them in the landscape. Simple trees in mulch as a landscape treatment that's easily maintainable. The swale kind of system in terms of water and aquatic plants, moving to semi-aquatic plants and to terrestrial plants has been thought about in terms of what works in the area, but also what's endemic as well. And then the bottom image, of course, like just play elements wherever we can, recycling timber logs. We have to take some trees down as part of this development. So wherever we can, we're sort of stockpiling what we can and reinserting that in the landscape as sort of play elements. And then obviously play equipment as well. If we can get some bespoke elements in there, we'd love to. But as I said before, the idea of having off-the-shelf items is great from council's perspective, as it means they can always get parts for replacement.
Thanks, Jack. More of you. This is a bit of you and a bit of me.
Cool.
You can talk about the images.
Okay, I'll talk about the pretty pictures. So sports courts, we were keen to get some multi-courts in the site, and it kind of speaks to what the master plan said, before in terms of active play. It's important to have a range of facilities and a range of elements for people with different abilities and different ages. So exercise equipment, play we've mentioned before, and then just circulation trails as well. So the notion of being able to get onto a shared use path and move around this development site's been something that's integrated to the master plan from the get-go. So we're still keen to maximise that wherever we can. Bottom right, so the picnic shelters, passive play as well, kids playing soccer. So although there's not a formal sports oval, there will be space for kids to kick about on the weekend or after school. And then, as I was saying before, that connectivity with shared use paths for scooters and bikes and for families with prams is really, really important. It's something that we've been making sure that we integrate with our design thinking. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks.
Can I just ask, is that going to, in my mind, that looks very much like the Reed playground with that type of setup? Wendy, would you concur?
Somewhat similar. Yeah, that's probably a good analogy. I think, though, when we've discussed the type of the mixture of play here, I think it would still work in more with the natural environment at that vertical aspect of play as well. I'm not talking about rock climbing walls or anything like that, but like just the physical topography and working in with that. And I think also, again, probably having the better mix of age group appropriate play, which I know is something that at Reed, again, it's for ultimately probably preferred for bigger kids. And obviously this one really has then got the balance with the sport and I guess more sort of passive rec going with it. But yeah, I guess in terms of the headline play equipment, maybe similar to Reed. Yeah, a bit more shelter shed. Do you mind if I?
Go for it.
But I think in some of the early conversations we've had around what we'd really like out of that is to create that real community hub place where not only can you go and have, not only where your kids can go and play safely, perhaps without, you know, the need to be sort of helicopter parenting there, but where the community can come and gather, that sort of somewhere quite intergenerational, I think, which is something that we do miss in a lot of our other areas. So that was something that we did talk about in this, and that is the virtue of having the picnic areas, the passive rec, the structured play, but then a lot of unstructured play around it, but all within a setup that allows, I don't know, oversight and safety, because again, there's a concept that when you start to mix age groups of play and passive rec, it can discourage some other age groups to participate. So I think that's some of the thinking we've put into this, noting that it's still, you know, all quite conceptual.
I was going to say, it's still quite conceptual, but the idea is right in terms of we've got enough space here to allow for those different age groups and different ability groups as well. So just being able to, I guess, provide some physical separation from teenagers, for teenagers, and that active play space for young ones as well. It's really important.
I'm just conscious of time. We've got 5 minutes left. How many slides have we got left, Jack?
Heath, can I just say, you probably already done it, but the area that we're talking about there, and that was 3 dairy farms on the area where I live, you know, across from there. So Kosh has got one of those dairy farms houses, and there was 3 bores on that area there. And then all of a sudden the government came in and said, no, you've got to lock your bores down, that sort of thing. And we used to play in the quarry and that sort of thing there, and they stopped mining sand there because the water came in. So I'm not sure whether you have seen the records of what water is in the area, because they used to grow lucerne and everything in the area there opposite, and they stopped the mining of sand, mainly because it filled with water straight away.
Amazing. I didn't know the history of the site that far. That's amazing. I think, look, we are filling the quarry, I think, to get the levels. So, you know, I think that, you know, that shouldn't be a problem in the future. I don't think the quarry reserve will ever flood. But it's interesting to know the history of it. Thank you.
All right. Is it a Heath or a me question? Heath. All right, Heath.
I'm looking at Google Maps, and you've got a community hub there on Eastern Drive. This one is about 600 to 700 metres away. 200 metres you've got Highfield. What's your rationale having all these spaces? These, you know, it seems like a lot of spaces in a small area.
No, it's been thought about at the master plan level. So initially this was going to be the regional open space for the precinct. We've sort of diluted that a little bit with removing the school from the equation. It kind of didn't make sense. So it's become more of a district level space. We do have Sea Gas Reserve, you're right, further up the street, and that will have a different offering. We've been talking to council about that one as well, and there's things like dog parks and BMX tracks and that kind of stuff that we're proposing in there. That's a lot more natural, a lot more kind of, and it's on a bit of an angle as well. So that's a lot more topography there and a lot more naturalistic. This will be the heart of the development really, and it'll still work on numerous levels. And I think, you know, in the end there'll be enough population spread across the development to justify it.
Thanks. I've given this slide to you, obviously. You've got the numbers. I'm happy to talk about it, but I was being charitable saying the original scope in today's value is $15 million. It's probably closer to 20 million. Anyway, the figure we've managed to get down to with contingencies is a number less than 10, which was, I guess, the challenge I set myself. Next slide. This is kind of a Heath one again. This is just species list, but we're going to have to go over it again. I guess you've already covered it broadly. Unless you've got specific questions about the species, it's only indicative anyway. I think that's okay. I think I might talk about next steps, I think, because there's been a few people asking about that. So, obviously here tonight, so this is workshop 1. We'll talk about Cheek Avenue Corridor, which is specifically about transport. Richard will be the star attraction on that one. So that will be in May. And then we'll talk about all other traffic interventions in June. And I think we've got our dates wrong. The May 20th one actually is confidential. The one after that probably isn't. So that's the wrong way around, so I apologise for that. So 17th of June will be probably just an open session, but 20th of May will be confidential. I'll spend some time over the next few months with Richard number crunching what those figures look like on a per hectare, per lot basis, and there'll be need to talk obviously to other future developers, Springwood of course, who are in the room, welcome. We'll probably have some more discussions on those numbers. I also think we'll probably need to work out 3 deeds. There's the deed for community infrastructure. At the moment, so you know, there is one deed which is about a page long that covers community infrastructure within what I call the TICI deed, which is the Traffic Interventions Community Infrastructure deed, hence TICI, because it's too hard to explain over and over again. There's really no depth to analysis within the deed. There are some background methodologies as to how some numbers were worked out, but it wasn't anywhere near as advanced as the work we've now done, I don't think. So I think there's a community intervention deed that needs to get looked at, which will involve a range of parties. There'll be a separate deed, I suspect, for Cheek Avenue, which will link back to traffic interventions from the parties who had contributions required in 2017. That's Springwood, that's council, other future developers, but I would suggest also there might be other parties who aren't in this room, specifically developing to the north of Gawler, who may be part of that conversation. And probably did as well in terms of state roads further to the north around Cheek Avenue, Barossa Valley Way. And that's deed number 2, I'll call it. And then deed number 3 is all other traffic interventions in Gawler East. So there's a lot to digest, and you'll probably cursing me over the next few months that I'm giving you too much information, but I have promised this the last few years that I'm going to get this work done, and I will get it done. And then once we've got that work done and we actually understand what the proposition is in terms of perhaps the concept plans I've shown you today, what the deeds look like, and we'll work out an engagement plan at a council level with the community, work out whether we do drop-in sessions or a mixture of different ways of socialising the evolution of the master plan. I think even Wellco themselves have said that they want to revisit the master plan, so we'll coordinate with Wellco on that, because there's no point engaging on the quarry and not looking at the overall master plan and how that's evolved. I see this as a bit of a partnership in that sense. And then if we can get our deeds sorted out and socialise and engage with the community so there's no surprises, then hopefully next financial year we'll have done all the crunching and we can work out what separate rate looks like. And that'll be set for the year after, which is 26-27, because obviously it's financial year based. I think that covers everything, and I know I've probably gone close to over time by 3 minutes, so I apologise for that, but thank you. We'll move on to the next set of presenters. Do you want to get them? Yep. Right. You want a 5-minute stretch? If you want to have a chat to the Wellco guys, by all means, have a 5-minute chat. Up here, I'll stay here. Right. Hey, thank you. You've got to have it easy. All right, we're now on the way home. So we're here to talk about weekly food green organic trials. So move forward, Jack. Okay, we have the resolution, as you're aware of, which basically required us to come back and talk about industry expert experiences, and that's why we've got the people in the room tonight. Mark will speak first, and then I'll let Toby, who everyone knows Toby from Norma, he'll be here to answer the thorny questions from his perspective as to the way of the world. No pressure on Toby. All right, Mark, it's all yours.
Thank you. Thanks all. Yeah, Mark Rawson from Rawtech, Managing Director, Principal Consultant. My background, my life, former life is a chemical engineer. Started my world in the oil and gas industry, believe it or not. And Toby and I were just reflecting as we were waiting to come in. I've been in the waste sector since 2002, so over 23 years, and been working in my own consultancy with a team since 2007. Tonight is an opportunity, and maybe if you move to the next slide there, Jack, is to share our experience with working with councils and communities that have implemented weekly food organics and garden organics and fortnightly landfill, or trialling that same system. So food organics, garden organics, the green bin, as everyone's aware of, is from our perspective is a great opportunity, and this is a picture of Holdfast in that. So we've been fortunate enough to support councils through their planning and development
and then reporting of the trials, auditing the business case development, and then helping with the implementation. And I'll work through some of those findings and what we've found, and we're still connected to a range of those councils and still working with a range of those councils that are looking to transition at the moment. Thanks, Jack. Next one. So what is weekly FOGO? It's changing that system to a weekly food organics, garden organics bin, and changing the frequency of the landfill bin to fortnightly. Commingle stays fortnightly. Now, this may not seem like a massive change, but it's a significant system change that changes behaviour. So what we've been working on, and Toby, you'll be able to talk to this, we've in the sector and in the industry, we've been working very long and hard of trying to get people to put things in the right bin. And they're still not great at it, and what we've found is that a system change helps get the right material, in particular the food organics, into the right bin. The other thing with this system is it needs to have some additional supports for residents, and that might be an upsize or additional landfill bins, and that might be for families, large families, or households with medical needs, and also due to the current regulations and legislation, there's a requirement to provide access to a weekly general waste collection if all those other systems don't work. In the ideal world, from our perspective, you wouldn't have that, but there's the environmental protection policy, you've possibly been briefed on that before, that has a requirement to do that. But what we see is that a system can absolutely be implemented with that available, and you just manage those people that have a special need to have that weekly collection. I'm happy to answer questions as we go too, so so Jack, next slide please. Why weekly food organics, garden organics? So why do we bother? And the main driver of this is to get the food from the red or the blue bin, as whatever system you may have, into the green bin. What we see is that persistently stays in the landfill or the residual waste bin, and this system enables that change. It significantly supports local jobs and a circular economy. You'd be familiar with the circular economy. This is taking food, getting that food into the green bin, getting that green bin to composters who produce soil amendment, and that soil goes back to grow more food, and around we go again. So South Australian soils are significantly depleted in terms of nutrients and water bearing capacity, and we have some great composters here in South Australia that develop great products that can then improve that soil. It does reduce greenhouse gas emissions through less food going to landfill, and there's also emissions reduction from less fertiliser as well. So in your instance, I believe the red bin is processed. Toby, is that what it's going to be shortly, to remove that? But what we see is there's still a strong net greenhouse gas benefit independent of that organics coming out from displacing synthetic fertilisers using compost. It gives households more capacity each fortnight because you suddenly have a 240 litre bin done weekly versus the 140 litre bin done weekly. So it gives more capacity to the household. And realistically, what that's doing though is reducing the capacity of the landfill, so the householder does have to change behaviours. So that is one of the things that drives the success of this system, but the householders have to change the way they do it. They can't do exactly what they did before. It does match more closely to the household generation. I'll show you what's in the bin, which you'd be familiar with, and we see that it's cost neutral or a modest saving depending on how it's managed. So I don't want to leave you today thinking that this is rivers of gold and money to be made from doing this, but it has, from the system, people that we've seen implement this, there is a net saving to the council and the community. That saving would be greater if we didn't have to support opt-out households, but that's what we do have to do in metropolitan councils. Please, Paul.
Just two questions, Mark.
Sure.
You talked about behavioural change and the cost, the cost savings. Can you just give us an idea of how that works to change behaviours? What techniques or what models of learning, whatever you want to call it, to change behaviours?
Yeah, well, it's mainly driven by you have a red bin or your landfill bin picked up every 2 weeks, so you actually need to look after that capacity. You can't fill it up with your kitchen bin full of food waste, etc. You need to sort that out and put that food waste into the green bin and whatever residual, which is typically contaminated plastics, other soft plastics, as we know, they're more difficult to recycle. So it just requires the behaviour change, and that bin is coming regularly. That's what drives it.
I suppose what I'm getting at is there other support to help people change the behaviours? You know, like an educational program.
Absolutely. So it's very important as part of the implementation and also part of the trial is to make sure you're educating your community on why we're doing the change, what's the reason, what's the motivation that we're doing this for, which is all of these reasons that we've got here. But absolutely support them. These are the materials that can go into your green bin. These are the tissues or the paper towel or all of the bones, all of those things that we've told them a lot, but it's you certainly want to make sure that you're supporting at the time of transition. We roll out a new, the council we work with have rolled out a new caddy, a bag, comms material, you promote it, you do a whole education program to support that system change.
The other question is, just basically, how do you get the cost savings? Why is it cost neutral, and why might there be savings?
Yes, so that savings driven, so typically there's a slight, or there is an increase in collection costs, but that is more than offset by the savings in processing costs. And Toby will be able to give you your figures more clearly, but typically if you've got composting, it might be in the order of $50, and if you're going to landfill, it might be $150 to $200 total. So that it's that difference in those two pricing of processing. As you shift tonnes across to the lower cost composting cost, you get savings. But there is additional collection costs. So there is. So I don't want to. That's what I don't want to paint a picture that this is a big money making change, but it's a very strong environmental and diversion and performance change.
Yeah, just on why is it an extra cost for collection when the red bin's picked up once a fortnight?
Yeah.
And the green bin, I mean, it just looks like to me that you're just swapping one for the other.
Yeah, well, Paul, the main reason for that is this requirement to provide that weekly collection for some customers that you cannot satisfy to stay on the existing systems. Yeah. So there's a truck every second week. There's an additional truck that needs to go and collect those. Or potentially little, they're typically the same size truck, but the truck has to go around and find those bins. So depending on which council, so Prospect is running about 5% of their community have opted back to the old system as an example in a trial. And there's a truck that needs to go and collect those. Port Pirie doesn't have the same legislative requirements and doesn't have to do that, so they get the full benefit of that. Holdfast, who was the first council to roll it out, had a very different approach in terms of how they manage opt-outs, and they were between 20 and 30% opting out. So we've learnt a lot, and that was the first mover, if you like, so that there's ways to minimise that, and typically I would say somewhere around that 5 to 10% is where councils should expect to be able to maintain it with a proactive management system. Sorry, I'm probably jumped about 15 slides ahead, but you'll save me later on. Thanks. We've touched on this, and this is very typical. If we audit most councils' bins, we find that I think there's 36% of your bin is material that should be presented in the green bin. So your landfill bin, 36% of that should be in the green bin. There's still some commingled recyclables, and then there's other material that should be in that bin. So that is the biggest chunk of material that's left in your landfill bin, and that is very common. Typically, it's in that 35 to 50% of that bin. The other thing, so we worked with Norma to deliver the audits for you last year for all three councils. One of the things that was quite interesting for us is the food efficiency. So only 2% of your food is presented in your green bin. So we look at where's food, all the food across all three bins, where should it be? And 98% of it was in the wrong bin, so only 2% of it was in the right bin. So was interesting to me. Again, we typically would see that 10 to 15%, but it was surprisingly low. One really positive was you have a very low contamination rate, which is excellent. So around that 1%, which is very good. So low contamination in your green bin. Thanks, Jack. So I've mentioned a couple of these already. So 2 councils that are fully transitioned in South Australia are City of Holdfast Bay, that was some 3 years ago, and Port Pirie 12 months ago. We worked with Port Pirie with their rollout about this time last year. They've had significant success, and the communities have embraced it and moved forward. There is always around these transition, there is a bit of pushback and it's a change, and as elected members, you would hear that. So I don't want to pretend that you wouldn't, but what we would do is gear you up with all the frequently asked questions so you can answer those questions around those times. There's a range of councils that are doing trials in different structures and different areas. We've worked with all of these councils. Adelaide Hills. Adelaide Hills has a motion to implement in the next financial year, so they're potentially rolling out end of this year, early next year. Campbelltown is trialling. Charles Sturt is trialling. I think they may be changing their trials. Prospect has 1 day, and there's a range of other councils that are considering it. So there's a fair bit of movement around the country. More broadly, you'll see this. So both Victoria and New South Wales have got very strong positions on FOGO, and in particular New South Wales has a requirement for weekly FOGO, which was actually a surprise for me. WA, we've worked with those councils as well, and there's a lot of councils in WA that have moved to the weekly FOGO model. So it's not particularly new, but it's very reliable in what it delivers. So that's what we've seen from looking at it around the country. Thanks, Joe. So the results. This is what we see. So this is I just need to acknowledge this data. This is from the LGA. They're doing some work, and this is early release data. So those councils are anonymous, but I'm familiar with all of them. And for example, Council 7 is Port Pirie, so they moved from 46% to 68% through their transition. The 45% for Gawler is based on your last financial year's tonnage numbers. I think when we did the audit, we did a calculation around 50%, so somewhere around that 45 to 50% is where you are. What we see though is every council makes a step change when they implement this. I can't overestimate the challenge to make a 1 or 2% change in diversion is very hard. So that's one of the state measures is diversion from landfill, and we have a target of 70% from a curbside diversion. So this is the only way that I could see in a medium term achieving something close to that result. So different councils come from different points and they achieve different outcomes, but they're all very, very, very quick and strong changes to the way they do it. So this is a combination of trials and those that are fully implemented. So the pre-trial and the post-trial results. Thanks, Jack. This is an example. This is very typical. We've got about, I don't know, half a dozen of these, and this is an example from Prospect. So Prospect did a day trial, so they had a whole day's worth of data, which is great. So it means that we get the full weights of the truck. So they were sort of tracking along at 58, 57%, and within 2 weeks they move up to around that 70%, and they're running at 72% now. So and as you can see, the landfill bin drops and the green bin goes up. Commingle goes up a touch, which you'd expect people to maybe that 15% I showed you before in the residual bin, they have to probably go, well, we've got to get that into the right bin as well. So it does move performance directionally right, and it just stays at that new level. So that was Prospect. Port Pirie, similar things, came off a lower base. They didn't have any food organics before this, so they had no. They hadn't rolled out a food organic service, so they did the food at the same time as changing the frequency, which is was a good opportunity. And again, they saw a similar performance. They're a significantly drier community, so that you're probably not expecting as much garden waste, which holds their diversion down a touch, but very good overall result. So there's sort of a couple of examples, and this is replicated every time we see it. It just goes zip, and it just stays there. So. Food efficiency, so this is, again, just defining what that is. So we look at the food over the 3 bins and we say what percentage has gone into, of that food has gone into the right bin. As I mentioned before, we typically see it around that sort of 10 to 15%, some are running a bit higher. But Gawler, for some reason, was running low. I still can't quite work out why it was so low. Toby, you might have an answer for that. Do you know why that's so low? Well, that's smart. That's where it should be. Yeah. But less food waste, the better. So it was surprisingly low. But what we see is that just an immediate step up of the food going into the right bin. I suppose again acknowledging this is still not perfect. People are still not perfect. They will still have some material that gets mixed with other waste that ends up in the residual bin. That, I suppose that's the opportunity to continue to drive that up over time through behaviour change and education. So that's what we see from food efficiency and diversion. Contamination, so that's obviously a question that gets asked too. What does this do to contamination? What we have seen is that it stays typically the same as you had before for your council. So with all of these councils, with trials and with implementation, we've tested before, we've tested during the trial, and then we've tested after the trial, and we've tested year or two after those trials. And what we see, if you start around 2%, you stay at around 2%. If you're at 5%, you stay at 5%. So if you've got, that's what we've seen in practice, and the reality is contamination has to be managed and a structured and a resource process. So that, again, Toby can probably answer how that gets managed from a normal perspective, but it's an active process. You need to educate those in your community that are not putting the right things in the right bin, and continue to educate them where you can. And technology can help that, but it still needs some active management. Sorry, Jay, just go back there. Opt-out management and resourcing. So we call this a supported opt-out model, an annual renewal. So what we recommend, when we say supported opt-out, it means you can't press a button and suddenly you're opted out. What we recommend is that you need to contact council or Norma or whoever's your customer service and have that discussion with them. So if you have certain needs, or you've got a large family, whatever, council can offer you some options. That might be the larger bin, or explain what can go into the right bin. So what we find is with that, there's a pathway to intervene rather than I need more landfill capacity. I'm straight away I'm out of the system and back into the old system. So that's what we have seen, and Prospect is a good example of managing that well, and so is Adelaide Hills a good example of managing that well, and Pirie's obviously a good example of managing it well. They haven't had to because they don't require it, but they do an additional bin for families or people with special exemption needs. So I'd certainly recommend that. And the other thing is just to flag, there is that resourcing of the additional landfill collection every second week to collect the opt-out. So that is a resource. The emissions related to that resource are still, emissions and costs are still more than outweigh than the benefit of getting the food into the composting system. So you can have comfort that still is a net benefit for you. So that's contamination opt-out. Thanks, Jay. What we've experienced, and this is probably talking about the community. So again, I don't want to paint any of this as perfect. The majority will embrace weekly FOGO. And as always, you'll have passionate champions in your community, and you'll have a quiet middle that just go, okay, this must be good. People have thought about this and made an informed decision for us, and then you'll have a small, noisy detractors that will try to make a big issue of this. What we're seeing more and more is that it self-moderates, and there's people that, like in social media, and I'm sure Gawler has social media, there's people that will come on and will go, oh, the world's going to end, they've taken my landfill bin away for every week, and that's what I pay for, and the next thing there's actually some other folk from your community that will jump on and say, no, this is a good thing, and this is why we're doing this. That's what we've seen. We saw that in Port Pirie, and we've seen that with other councils. But I don't want to pretend that you won't get feedback. You'll get some feedback that people don't like having to change the way that they've always done that. Yeah, exactly. You probably could. But hopefully what they'll see, so what we see, it's a very, I said 6 to 8, it's probably generous, it's probably more like a 2 to 4 week. It's a very quick hump that you have to go over that you'll get that feedback, and people are adjusting, and very quickly, as you saw from those graphs, it stabilises back at the new level. People change their behaviour. There's a flurry of calls, and when we say flurry of calls, it's manageable. With Eastways, with Prospect, they geared up and they were checking the phones whether there was a problem with the phones, because they weren't getting many calls, and they were expecting to get more calls. But there'll be, you do need to be prepared. You need to have all your comms ready, you have your FAQs, you have your systems ready to support people when they have questions, and do it in a timely manner. But then it very quickly disappears, and the community will embrace it. And I'll say this, and I know that I don't need to say this, but it does require a commitment and investment from the elected members. It does need to have people comfortable and confident. Council administration and Norma need to be resourced and geared up to do it. You don't turn up 2 minutes and go, let's do this next week. This sounds like a good idea. There's significant prep and resourcing and timing to get this right. And customer service and community-facing staff. So, and we talk to other council staff so that if they got questions, they could help field those things. So that's what we see. Thanks, Jack. And this is again very cooker. You can pretty much repeat what you'd see with the town of Gawler as well. So satisfaction with weekly FOGO. There's with Prospect, it's either 50%, close to 70% are very satisfied, and would like to continue 70%. So it's that 80-20 or 70-30 sort of rule. There's a large majority that are very comfortable with it. There are 23% when they've had a go at it and they've trialled it, they would say, no, I prefer the old system. So I'm just flagging that. There's not, everyone doesn't go, oh yeah, we've done this, and there's some that are unsure and they'll just go with the flow. But everyone gets on and does it once they experience. So I suppose the message here is 70% are very strong supporters of this change. If we do next one, thanks, Jack. Charles Sturt was similar when they tested it. So yeah, 64% were strong advocates. Next one, thanks, Jack. This is Adelaide Hills. So the townships were trialled. So they're not doing rural because of the logistics challenges with that. It's a long way to collect, and potentially if people opt out. But again, that 70% was another strong one there. So their council have made a motion to roll it out, and that will happen in the next financial year. So it's very common. Feedback was the same with Holdfast Bay as well with their trial. Thanks, Jack. Pathway to implement. Oh, so before we go on, any queries or questions on the informational data as the experience we're seeing? All makes sense? Good. So pathway to implement. So this is sort of pulling together our experience on how others have implemented and a pathway you could consider if you wanted to. So, but this is what we've seen. So the business case and extensive planning. You need to understand what is your business case and potentially to do that before you do a trial. So what is the business case given your collection costs? You've got a new collection contract coming. and then the processing and disposal. To have a look at that business case and be satisfied within the parameters, yes, it's going to deliver a reasonable outcome. Again, I'm not privy to what the contracted rates are, so only doing this case would tell you. Then there is extensive planning. If you're going to trial, where do you want to trial? How do you get a good cross-representation of it? Our experience is that you don't have to be too picky. It's because the performance is quite the same, but it's nice to get a bit of representation across your community with that. In terms of time frame, we would recommend at least a minimum of 6, more likely a 12-month trial, and it's at least a 18-month to 24-month process to full transition. By the time you go through a trial, get your results, do the report, come back to council, look at the business case, get a motion, plan for the rollout. It's an extensive period. This isn't, again, something that we could do tomorrow. Pirrie didn't do a trial, but they had a better set of conditions in terms of they didn't have to provide that weekly general waste requirement. In terms of the cost to do the trial, to do this well, and there's the caddies, bags, comms, there's costs for additional truck hours, there's a range of additional costs, analysis, auditing, etc. You can quickly get from 100 to 200K depending on how extensive you set your trial up. So that's something you'd assess during your business case. You then need to make sure that you've got the supporting mechanisms and flexibilities to support your residents that have additional needs, and then that process to manage the opt-outs and keeping the majority on weekly FOGO. And the other thing that's required is strong support from the elected members that understand there'll be some minor pushback for a small period. And then also what's required is that ongoing process to manage contamination. But if you do that, there's very good outcomes and very reliable, and I can be very confident in the outcome that you'll get. Any questions on that? There's a fair bit in that. Toby, you got any comments or queries, aren't you? Yep. Anything to add there? Anything I've missed?
Did you mention the cost of the business case itself, from your experience? That's separate to the cost of the trial.
Yeah, well, that's something that we have been supporting councils with, sure. and there's it's more cost effective now because we've done it a few times. So it might be in the order of 10 to 15K, right. That type of thing. Okay. Yep, that sort of order of magnitude to do that. But that's sort of part of the trial cost and preparing for the trial as well. Please, Paul.
Back to that 2%.
Contamination?
Contamination. Is that FOGO in the red bin?
Sorry, no, food efficiency. Was that the number you talked about?
Yeah, the 2%.
Yep.
And everyone else was 14, 15%, now ours was 2.
Yep.
I don't really understand that figure.
Let me explain that. So what that means is 2% of on average, and it does appear like of the food across all the bin systems is ending up in the green bin. So we're only being efficient with 2%. 2% of the food that's in the, let's assume there's nothing in the yellow bin, but in the red bin and the green bin, only 2% of the combined food is ending up in the green bin. So 98% of it is most likely still in the red bin. Yeah. So food's not in the right bin is the key message. Most other councils that are on a weekly general waste, fortnightly FOGO, and have had the FOGO implemented for a while, will be around that 15%.
But you haven't done, have you done an actual audit on our red bin to actually look at the
yes.
FOGO in there?
Yep, and that's what that pie graph was. So that was that 36%.
Right.
So 36% of your red bin is food.
Right. So this trial would potentially move majority of that 37% over to the green bin?
At least 50%. Yeah. So again, nothing's perfect in this world, but 50, 60, I think we've seen up to 60. If you're high performers and you do a great job, you might find that you have 60%. So, yep.
So it's not the 2% we're actually looking at?
We're trying 36% of that bin, of your red bin, should be in the green bin.
That's what, okay.
And realistically, you'll only get 50 to 60% of that 36%. So yeah, 18%. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So this might be a silly question, but are we still opt-in for FOGO? Like, so you have to fill out the application and, or that's all just rolled out over the town? Yeah, that's rolled out. Yeah, because I do remember it was an opt-in.
Yep.
No, I've had my green bin for a while now, so I haven't noticed any change, but yeah, we've now got it across the pig. Okay?
Yep. Great.
To actually get the contents and that into that bin, it's done obviously through a plastic bag and all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
Is that a problem where people are putting bags that aren't biodegradable and things like that? I mean, that's one thing I was sort of thinking, well, you know, some people are just as rough as guts and they might use any bloody thing, old undies and all, to put their stuff in to send it out. But, you know,
if they're cotton undies, it's probably okay. But you're absolutely right in terms of. But as part of your communications, there needs to be in a compostable bag. So as part of the rollout, you will have a caddy and a roll of compostable bags that goes with it. The other thing that's changed recently is the barrier bags in supermarkets have changed to compostable. They're no longer able to be plastic. So again, making that link for when you buy the food and you come home, hopefully you put your food scraps into the compostable bag that you've got from Woolies or Coles or Aldi, and then that goes in your green bin. And that's also there to that will assist the business case in terms of council not having to continue to fund or co-fund or that.
Same as the bags at the dog park, for example.
Correct. So, but absolutely, there are still people that will do the wrong thing. So part of your comms, you really need to say this needs to be a compostable, certified compostable, seedling tick logo on it to go into that. We don't want to see anything else. So a real critical thing is to make sure that we can make as high a grade compost as we can to support the farmers and get that material back into farms. Yep. Please.
So obviously it's going to cost rough around 220k to do a trial, sort of thing, to work out, and then it's going to cost neutral.
Yep.
What's the cost on the full transition?
Yeah, good question. So that this trial and then the business case would help gauge that, and it's obviously it depends on the size of your council. So Holdfast, which is a 17,000 household, which I think you're 15,000 household. Are we? 13. So they're in the order of 250 grand. So the trial has a bit. So you could find, and typically what will happen is your 500 households, they won't ever come back. If it's all going well, they'll stay on there, and they've done their transition, and then you build out around that to do that. So different councils have different numbers. I don't want to set expectations. So let's say 250 to 500, but the payback period for that should be under 5 years to deliver that, and then you're ahead. So in terms of the payback. Well, again, when we say cost neutral, it's so there is a slight, I said a modest savings. I said cost neutral or modest savings. There is typically a modest saving in that, and it'll take some period of time to pay off that investment that you've paid. But it's not a. I suppose I just didn't want to give it the impression that it was a.
Yeah, I don't get it wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And to give you the accurate dollar numbers, the business case to determine your trial, then the trial gives you the data and your engagement piece from your community, so that your community gets us to use it, and then they give you the feedback. You do survey, and then you've got all the pieces of the puzzles. Norma gives you the cost to be able to do the collection and the processing. We can have a look at contamination. There's a whole range of things that you can look at, and you can make a fully informed decision going forward. So that's the typical pathway that we've worked with councils on. Yeah, please.
This one might be for Toby, but just in terms of when we talk about costs, obviously we work with Norma. Like, what's Norma's responsibility and what's council's responsibility, I guess?
what's Norma's responsibility? Well, Norma's responsibility is to provide the services across the 3 councils. We're here to assist and work through this process, but I think what would be helpful for us is to understand, what are sort of the goals or achievements that Gawler want to get out of this, because as you know, we're sending the red bin as of June to IWS, where they take that through a process and remove the organics out. Is it the view of Gawler to make sure that you get the highest beneficial reuse of that material? Because if it is, then I think a FOGO trial is beneficial, because that material goes into the FOGO bin. It's processed at a higher rate. It can go out to farmland and other things. Or if it's just about removing the organics out of landfill, then the process that we're taking the red bin through will achieve that.
And
just in terms of...
sorry, you go.
Just in terms of removing organics from landfill, obviously there's a couple factors to that. One is, of course, the environmental part, which would be done by IWS. But in terms of cost for Norma, I imagine a lot of that there's a processing cost attached to the landfill, which may be absorbed. Is that absorbed in the IWS contract, and is there levies and things from state government on top of that actually would see a decrease in the operating cost for Norma if that's removed pre-sorting, sending to IWS to sort?
I think the gate fee that we get to process the red bin takes into consideration the 40% or so of organic material, so that IWS are not paying a levy on that. They're paying a levy on the 60%, which is going to landfill. So that's taken into consideration in terms of the landfill gate fee.
Okay, so the gate fee probably won't change then.
No, and I think the offset, and if I may get this wrong, Mark, but the real benefit of this process that Mark's talking about is the difference between the $40 or $50 a tonne for organic processing as opposed to the 200 plus. And this is part of the reason why I do want to do a presentation tonight, is because I want to get my head around what the financials and the data looks like in terms of having additional trucks on the road, additional collection costs, as opposed to the process that we're putting the red bin through, and what is the benefit in terms of the financials to put the residents through this, when it may be just the view that you want to get it out of landfill. And if that's the case, I need to get my head around that information in more of a clearer way.
It might be premature, but it would be interesting, because it sounds like so the gate fee is not going to change because it's based on assumptions which are made by IWS as part of the contract, but I assume the tonnage would go down somewhat, and of course that the high amount of water in there is quite heavy. So I would expect is the gate fee charged per tonne. So I imagine there would be a saving in there, but it'd be interesting to see those numbers once you've been through that and it's able to come back, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that it's definitely worth going out and having a look at the material that's coming to IWS from the weekly FOGO collections, to have a look at it and see the contamination and view it firsthand. I think if you're going to make a decision to make a big step change, then everyone around this room needs to be comfortable of what that's going to achieve and where it's going to go. That's just my view, because I know that I'll be in the firing line if it doesn't go the way that I've promised.
So just in regards to timeframes, obviously IWS processing, you've got a fair bit going on in Norma. So what are we talking about here? A 12-month, give us 12 months so we can actually see how things are performing, and then we also have the benefit of seeing how some of the other councils' trials are performing as well, and looking at what options we have available
Yeah.
Like, is that or is it 6 months, or is it 3 months, or is it 18? Like, just trying to understand if we are looking at a transitional thing, because I am cognizant of the education piece as well, to say, oh, we actually can get your organics out of the red bin, put it all in there, we'll sort it out for you. I am sort of cognizant of that as well, and just trying to manage the enabling of the behaviour, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that our education push and drive to get more of the organics out of the red bin into the green bin is never going to go away, and we need to boost that. But coming back to your question around timing, you know, Veolia finish up the 1st of September. We've got Solo, who started the organics collections early. They'll commence the commingled and the red bin 1st of September. So I'd like to think that we would give them at least, I don't know, let's say 6 months to bed that contract in, get everything running smoothly. So I would sort of suggest around this time next year that we would be in a position that we could, you know, run extra trucks and start looking at trials.
So I guess just around, I'm just trying to figure out the logistics, I guess, of, because we're not a one council operation with the waste. So, for example, does, you know, in terms of the trucks and moving it around and stuff, you know, it will go to 3 councils, and then, you know, you might require Playford and Salisbury have the red bin stuff going around every week, and we have it every 2 weeks, but then we require twice as many weeks where we have the FOGO bin. I'm just wondering, like, what's the logistics around, does that make it more inefficient? Would it be more efficient if we coordinated with the other councils, or, you know, just that sort of question?
Yeah, and I think that's the basis of why Norma's here, is that we've got consistency across the 3 councils, and it certainly makes our lives easier, our call centre, you know, easier to manage. We've got service level agreements across the 3 councils, and there are some minor differences, but I think it would be beneficial across all councils to share costs and other things if we all agreed on running this. So, you know, I do think that this should probably be communicated back to the Norma board as, you know, something that the board should consider, and certainly the other 2 councils to consider.
Thank you, Isaac, for bringing up what you said, because when I think about it, the red bin is 37% FOGO, is that right? When I know about plants, and I would say that it's a high concentration of water. So you're actually transporting water out to IWS to process. And if you can get that water into the green bin, I reckon that'd be cheaper. There must be a benefit there, because although the gate price is the same, you know, that's fine. But if you're going to, you know, potentially, it won't be 30%, 7% less, because it's only going to be 15% or something less. That must be a saving, must be. Yes, and then with the composting, that composting then goes out to the wider industry, whereas out at IWS it goes to the Red Centre Enterprise activities, which is on site, which is different again. So it isn't apples with apples. It's actually, I think it's an interesting dilemma, if you ask me.
Yeah, it is, and that's why, Councillor Kosh, you know, I think you need to make up your mind which direction, you know, you really want to take. Is it the focus on the highest beneficial reuse? And we were having this conversation about, you know, the fibre polishing plant, where we've got, you know, 5% conditions on us to export overseas, but we're looking for new markets to have a higher level of recycling and export exposure, which means we've got to be between sort of 1% and 2%. So is it the view to get it at that higher level, which may cost more, or to get it at a landfill, which has the environmental benefits? You know, I suppose that's what the business case is all about.
Yeah, it's an interesting dilemma. That's good.
I've only got one slide to go. I think you already did
this one, you actually set the time frame for me.
Oh,
I
right.
can move that back a bit. You said this time next year,
Oh,
so
yeah,
I said mid next year, but I gave you a bit too much time.
We've got about 5 minutes left,
Yep,
guys.
perfect. If you just jump back, Jack. So, sorry. So, sorry, have I got time to quickly go through this? So, it was just to say this is a potential pathway for Gawler in terms of timing, and I'm cognizant of the large transition that Norma is going through in terms of a service provider, and it's very good to steer clear of that. You don't want to have a trial mixed up with a transition over. So, I'd sort of said, well, if you were going to do a business plan, do some planning, determine what you're going to do, you'd be looking at starting a trial potentially mid-2026. And if you did a 6 to 12 month trial, you'll get your lived experience to inform your community consultation. You'll be able to get all the data for community, for your performance data, your community feedback, and the cost for the broader rollout. And it'll give you that information. That then trial report and business case would go to council, and you'd make an informed decision. Hopefully by the end of 2026. So the reason I say that, if it's a 6 month trial, pretty much within 6 months, even if you're doing a 12 month trial, you can do your testing and data and it doesn't change, is what we've seen in practice. We've done it at 6 months and 12 months and the data doesn't change. And then potentially by the time you do that and then plan for a broader rollout, it might be late 2027 or 2028, which I know sounds like a long way away, but time flies. To do these things properly, you need to plan them well. If I can just close in terms of, Toby made that point around the highest and best use. Again, that's something that I'm very, very passionate about in terms of getting materials to their highest and best use. Obviously, the best thing to do is eat the food, not create the food waste. So that's the best for the households as well in terms of budgets, etc. But the reality is we are going to have some food waste. To be able to get that material at least into composting, and you're going to be sending them to the same location. And Paul, just to your comment, there is a big price difference between the landfill cost and composting cost, and that's what drives this business model, and that would become evident from this. So if you have an interest in driving towards a circular economy and the highest quality, for me, FOGO is a good pathway to achieve that. So thanks, and I'm happy to ask any further questions.
Just quickly, there was a comment made about the other two councils that are the constituent councils of Norma there. Is this something which they're going to, a presentation which they're going to receive as well, or is this just something that might be a question for Andrew, or we might have opted into it?
Too late to stand up. I should stand up, shouldn't I? Obviously, I've provided the response in relation to the resolution that council passed. I'm not privy to what the other councils are currently debating and whether they have a resolution on the table. They don't at the moment, so I guess it's fair to say we're probably a bit further progressed in tossing the idea around than they are.
Yeah, apologies that I'd forgotten that was a resolution.
Yeah.
I think I might have been absent for that meeting.
But I think that what Toby said is also true, which is given the transition with IWS and what we're currently doing, maybe that period of 6 months from now, 9 months possibly, just to get a sense of how that's going might be worth looking at carefully. It might be some, going for a tour of the IWS facility or having a further briefing from Toby in maybe 6 to 9 months' time to get a better feel for what's working and what's not working. And then you can decide whether you want to do business cases, trials or other. But I think there's ultimately a conversation about where the three councils go as well, given, we don't want to make Norma's life more difficult than it needs to be. It's about a coordinated approach, I think, in terms of the Northern Corridor. Yep. I'm happy for any final questions. If you think Toby's got off too light and needs to answer another question or two, it's fine, but we are basically on the hour. We all good? All right, thank you, everyone.